drag you down to their level.
No, I'm just wising up a little bit.
She's right, you know. Don't make the same mistake I did. Keep your dignity intact.
Ah! My balls! They're on fire!
Look.
2002's Death to Smoochy, a neo-noir black crime comedy directed by Danny DeVito, starring Robin Williams, Edward Norton, Danny DeVito, Catherine Keener, Jon Stewart, and more. Let's take a quick look.
KidNet Television proudly presents America's favorite kid show host, Rainbow Randolph!
So you'll make sure my boy dances up front, right? Gets to sit in the chair?
You want your little booger eater on my show?
Meet Randolph Smiley. He once was rich. He once was famous. And he once was sane.
Rainbow Randolph is the man. Yes, oh yes, he is.
They kicked me out of the corporate penthouse. I'm homeless.
I can assure you, this network cannot survive another Rainbow Randolph.
Don't touch me! I'm a shot! Salmonella!
Sir, it is my personal mission to find a satisfactory replacement. Get me Smoochy.
You're telling me that KidNet is finally ready to pursue a show of Smoochy caliber.
Hey, it's Smoochy! Come on!
Hello, New Jersey! Despise you. I loathe you!
Now,
Waiter! My body was barely cold and you went to work for the Rhino. I gotta eat, don't I?
the only way to take back his career is to take down his replacement. In this jungle,
Going on safari. Safari.
hunting season
What's this?
Trust me, Sheldon, it's a handy accessory to have in this business.
never ends.
Tear him apart now and forever! What's up?
Robin Williams, Edward Norton, Danny DeVito, Catherine Keener.
What does it all mean?
Death to Smoochy.
Ian,
John,
you're back on the channel, but first time on the Cult of Films.
right on. I'm Ian. I'm on Bad Movie Night. We have a YouTube channel where my friend Chris and I review the latest in straight-to-VOD schlock, horror, action, sci-fi, what have you. We also have a podcast where the whole gang joins in. We talk about 80s and 90s straight-to-VHS schlock, occasionally with a guest. We recently had on a very special guest named Jon Dunning from the They Said We Said channel that none of you will ever hear. Too good for this world.
It's in the $10,000 tier of Patreon, and I just don't think we'll ever hit it, right? We've been working together a lot, you, Chris, and I, whether it be on Director's Cut over here or now on Cult of Films or over on your spot. So it's always good to link up because, you know, the Bad Movie Night and the They Said We Said kind of family both have a major thing in common. We both love films. Meet in the middle, and we could talk about M. Night Shyamalan films, or we could talk about good films like Death to Smoochy.
Hey, there's plenty of great M. Night Shyamalan movies.
That is true. The Visit was great.
A little bit too derivative of, there's this late 80s movie, I can't remember the name of it. Oh well, it'll come back to me.
Man, Death to Smoochy is a film that came out that lost its ass. We're talking about a budget of $50 million, made $8.3 million. Yeah. And this, you never see this kind of thing when a movie bombs this bad at the box office and is like this critically panned by like everyone hated this movie with this much talent behind it. I mean, Danny DeVito, obviously, you know, you had Adam Resnick that wrote this thing. He was a longtime David Letterman writer, and he's done a lot of other things like Cabin Boy he wrote. I mean, and then the sheer names of actors, the talent, like Robin Williams, Edward Norton, Catherine Keener of the time was on fire.
Stewart is the fourth male lead.
How the fuck did this not work?
I would say that it did work. If you're talking about its financial failure, I would say it came out at the absolute worst possible timing. Because this movie played with its realism in the way that felt very much like a 90s movie. And there was a very distinct event that happened about 6 months before this movie was released that kind of changed the tone of everything dramatically. This was written and filmed before September 11th, but came out 6 months afterward, and was set in a New York City where the biggest thing going on was children's network television. So it was hard. I think it was a hard pill to swallow at just the time it came out. I think it could have worked earlier, could have worked later, came out at the worst possible time. Because I think there's a lot to really like about this film. I'm surprised the critics hated it as much as they did, because there were some very virulent reviews from some very well-known reviewers at the time. Like, they were mad that this movie existed.
It was like it's so off-putting at the time, and like you said, it was probably what was going on. But even like Roger Ebert just said, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but something like, it took this level of talent with this many creative people to make a movie this bad, because like I think a bunch of less talented people would go for something like this and you just completely write it off. But I mean, I don't get it. I thought that everything was hilarious. It was so snappy. The performances are some of the best comedic performances ever. Yeah,
I would say, if there's a reason the reviewers hated it, and it's not why some people who watched it didn't like it, but the reason the reviewers hated it is that there's quite a bit of hubris to this movie. Like, so I love a dark comedy. I was in the bag for this movie. I was probably always going to like it, and I liked it at the time. I like it now. Make no buts about that. But it's just such an expensive movie to be making for mainstream audiences when you're doing what is ultimately probably a pretty niche type of a thing. So, I mean, this is really for a very specific audience, but was sold to a very broad audience. It's not a good combination.
And you could definitely see now, like, I remember watching it when it first came out. This was the year I think I graduated high school back in 2002. So, you know, this was, I was into film, but I wasn't really into, like, how film was received. You know, I was just coming out of, like, my job at Blockbuster, and so it was just one of those new releases, and I saw, you know, this is after Fight Club and everything, so I was already like super into Edward Norton with American History X, and of course, you know, Danny DeVito and Robin Williams is like one of my childhood heroes, you know, right up there with like Jim Carrey. So I was on board right away, and I didn't even know that people hated this film until years later, and I think it really was, you know, being so close to 9/11, because now this movie has definitely had some time to breathe, and it's definitely garnered like quite a cult following.
I think if this movie waited like even a year or two, if they let it sit on the shelf and let it age like a fine whiskey, it would have played better, because I don't think people were ready for the Robin Williams Dark Trilogy that came out all around that time.
Right.
This was the first of the three to come out. Okay. If this came out after Insomnia and, was it called 1 Hour Photo? Was that the name of it?
Yeah.
If it came out after those two, I think people might have been a little bit more ready to accept a darker Robin Williams role. He'd certainly played serious roles before.
Right.
You know, Good Will Hunting was a very serious role.
Fisher King.
But it wasn't. Yeah. But it wasn't dark, and I don't think people were ready for that. Also, this movie was marketed really badly. Did you happen to see a trailer for it recently?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it just treats it like this whimsical, fun kind of a movie, and it definitely leads you to believe Robin Williams is the star of the film. So, which it's really much more Smoochy, the titular character, you know, Edward Norton's movie.
Yeah, I think they're both kind of should receive top billing, because I think this is, and this might be, you know, hyperbolic or whatever, but in my opinion, this might be the best Robin Williams role. I mean, he has some iconic roles as the genie, Mrs. Doubtfire, all these, you know, Good Will Hunting, like you stated, in a different kind of role, and even stuff like Insomnia and 1 Hour Photo, where he is just terrifying. Like that is one of my favorite trilogies, as you said, of Robin Williams films, because he showed what's the saying? It's like, it's easier for a funny actor, a comedic actor, to be dramatic, but it's harder to do the opposite, and he is just such a great dramatic actor and terrifying actor when he wants to be. This encapsulated every Robin Williams, because it showed him being dark, it showed him being coked out, you know, circa 1970 Bay Area stand-up Robin Williams. It was just everything that, you know, and he was cartoonish, almost like the genie, so it literally had everything. And like, it was actually, I'm not gonna lie, like I watched this again last night pretty late, and I got teary-eyed a couple times. It sounds crazy to say, oh, I got teary-eyed watching Death to Smoochy, but just like, God, was he a fucking national treasure. Performance that was, it's kind of the opposite side of the coin was Edward Norton's character, because before this, Fight Club, rolling into American History X, or strike that, reverse it, I not off the top of my head, I don't know the correct order, but coming off those two films, and even something like Primal Fear with Richard Gere, which I think is one of the, in my opinion, that is Edward Norton's best performance on the silver screen is in Primal Fear. But rolling into those and then having to come off as the most wholesome, pure of mind and body and all about the children, organic person was not an easy task either. And it was, I thought it was pretty funny and kind of on the nose that he's running a Nazi rally, or being set up to run a Nazi rally.
In contrast to his character in American History X, of course. But yeah, I think people weren't necessarily quite ready for this role out of Edward Norton either, because they thought of him as such a serious, dramatic actor. And while he did play the straight man in this, it was comedic in its own way. I don't know. I think Edward Norton is the reason that I came to this movie so quickly. I don't believe I saw it in theaters. I didn't have a theater all that close to my house at that age. But I think I picked it up at Blockbuster the minute it hit the shelf, and I'd been anticipating, because I was an Edward Norton fan. I probably would have told you at around that time that he was my favorite actor.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen, American History X and Fight Club, and like the range he can show between that like incredibly badass but awful character in American History X to that meek little, like you believe him as this squeaky little office worker who can find his inner strength. And then also the score. I mean, I think the score was probably the last movie of his that I'd seen right before Death to Smoochy. And the way he pulls off that character, and the character within the character in that movie, was, I was prepared to expect anything out of Edward Norton. To see him play such a completely different role, I roll with the punches, man. That was expected.
He kind of shows one note throughout, but even though like he's constantly getting like berated and put down and demasculinized by Catherine Keener's character, he's still and just like learning the inner workings of the daytime childhood network thing, how disgusting it is. It almost made me think of Dogma, where Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are as Loki and Bartleby are going through shooting everybody in the boardroom meeting. Even with like the charities and whatnot, even though they're for children, but they're like the mob. Only someone like Ed Norton could sit there and have this like doughy-eyed, childlike performance of this like purity, and then towards the end, and this is skipping around, we'll kind of go through the movie also, but at the end he becomes like true Edward Norton. He's like screaming and saying he's gonna fucking shoot someone in the face, which he conveys so much range and emotion even in this character, even though that the film doesn't even allow to see it. He might have been like a troubled youth or something like that. It didn't really matter. You could just see that he always had something boiling under this kind of facade, and then once it got to that point and he was just like the uncorruptible is about to be corrupted, that's when they kind of scaled him back a little bit.
I don't know that I agree with your read on his character there, because I think I'm going to take a step back from that first, though. I made a big mistake. The last couple days, I didn't really have a lot of time to read about Death to Smoochy, so I put on a bunch of different podcasts and YouTube episodes where people have been talking about it, which is always a mistake, and a lot of people hating it, and even the people liking it shitting all over it. And some of the words that kept being used to describe it were scattered and all over the place and random, and I didn't see it that way at all. I think this script is incredibly dense.
Yeah.
And it does a lot with every scene, and that makes it feel very packed. So, I don't know, it just moves very quickly. Like, it's an hour and 50 minutes, and it doesn't feel that long to me. The theme to the movie is innocence, which is interesting that this movie, again, came out 6 months after 9/11, when America kind of lost its innocence in a way, being attacked on its own soil for the first time in God knows how long. People weren't ready for this kind of movie because, I mean, it definitely, after watching this movie at least a dozen times like I have, you have to ask yourself, do you want to live in a world with more Sheldon Mopeses? Or do you want to live in a world with more Rainbow Randolphs or, Irish crime bosses or charities that are run by mobsters,
Right.
So I think in this movie, Catherine Keener's character, was it Nora?
Mm-hmm. Nora Wells.
She ends up being the best analog for the audience because she comes at the whole situation pretty skeptically. She doesn't believe his facade, as you called it. She sees it as a facade.
Right.
Anyway. And she has to warm up to him and only lets her guard down after a long period of time and lots of opportunities for that facade to be tested. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think he is that pure. He is that guy. And what does it take to tear down a guy so incredibly pure of heart? And they try their best. They try their hardest. Rainbow Randolph comes at him. Bugsy comes at him. The Irish mob comes at him. and he almost snaps. He almost goes there. And at the end of the day, the Irish mob recognizes through their family member that they lost the beautiful nature of Sheldon Mopes, and they see that and they go, even though they're terrible people, let us do the terrible thing. Please preserve what's special about you. I think I definitely saw some reviewers talking about how random that Irish mob was. It's like, why do they have that? That's so random. You could save some time. Cut the movie down. Get rid of that. I'm like,
they were so essential.
Like, they were so essential to help to completing that arc for Sheldon and showing us that we can preserve our innocence to a degree. I mean, it does require some nastiness in the background, unfortunately. I'm ultimately a pessimistic person at the end of the day. But I want to believe, Believe for a minute. That's the funny thing about this movie, is that it's a dark comedy, and yet it comes around to having a very sappy, kind of happy ending, where even somebody who had been dragged down into the muck, the way they tried to drag down Sheldon as in Rainbow Randolph, can be pulled out of it. Very Star Wars in that way.
You are right. It's more, I'm saying that's kind of one way you could go as far as with Sheldon's character, just how Edward Norton portrays it. Like I said, there might be some kind of, childhood trauma or something that's made him become this. But I think you're more correct in saying, like, that was the point of why he was so inspired to become what he becomes, is because those kind of things, that purity kind of spoke to him. And I think he and Catherine Keener, their characters they run complete parallels, because they're the same person, just one actually gave in. It hit her in a different way, like in a sexual way, where she was like more attracted to that, where he was, they were just constantly stepping on him until he kind of reached that breaking point, and right before he made the step over the curb, so to speak, no pun, not an American History X joke, but it wasn't not one. But Catherine Keener, he kind of redeems her, and that's what's so powerful. That's why it is sappy, and that's why it should be sappy, because he is such this almost like Messiah type thing, where he pulls someone as far gone as a Rainbow Randolph back from the brink.
Certainly not what you expect after how unrelentingly dark the rest of this movie was, and led you to believe it was going.
Yeah, it ends on a dance number on ice.
I think one way to like prep somebody who's going to watch this for the first time, to like make them like frame this movie in a way that makes sense, is think of it as an analog for the 90s Batman movies. Where Sheldon Mopes is your Batman character. He's important to the story. He's the titular character. But ultimately, the villain, the cartoonish villains, steal the show, and they end up being what people fixate on. Robin Williams very much plays a Batman villain in this movie.
But like Buggy Ding Dong, they all feel like Batman Rogues Gallery type characters. Harvey Fierstein plays Merv Green, which
it has that same sense of realism too, like. The New York that's represented in this movie feels a little bit more Gotham-y than the real world that we live in.
Right. For those that haven't seen it, I guess it's too late to say spoilers, but it just starts off with it opens up on the Rainbow Randolph show. He is this kind of I don't want to say like Mr. Rogers type, more like a Captain Kangaroo analog. Well, like, you know, Smoochy is an analog for Barney, obviously, and then you go to Rainbow Randolph, probably like a Captain Kangaroo or something like that, and he is
kind of a song and dance man.
Yeah, friends come in all sizes.
Friends come in all sizes. do, 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 do. Yeah, I know. Robin Williams at one point explained the character as Liberace meets Fred Rogers.
The baby, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like from the moment the movie opens, you know, he's doing like what you would see on TV, and he's doing all his own dance moves. The dance choreography and all the ice skating, all this, they use like Olympic ice skaters, but for the dance numbers, just seeing Robin Williams and Edward Norton really go to town, like that is awesome. Like everything in this movie was probably such a pain in the ass. It was so tactile. This was kind of before, and it didn't even warrant like a lot of special effects or anything. There's a little bit of green screen, like when they're walking through New York, just like the big Smoochy like posters and marquees. But for the most part, everything is giant sets. They even built one of those old school, giant 360 sets for the ending where they're, they have the big kiss at the finale, and they have this giant rig going around it because it is shot. You said it was shot like a 90s comedy, and that's right. Like it was that level of sets and costuming and all these things, where that's why it cost $50 million.
Yeah, you can see every dollar, that $50 million in this movie. Like like you said, the dancing. They have a freaking ice show, and clearly they put a lot of effort into everything. So they definitely got their money's worth in terms of creating a product that looked like it cost that much. But yeah, it didn't draw out the audiences.
As a nice juxtaposition scene, right after you get this, saccharine sweet dance number from Robin Williams's Rainbow Randolph, you go right into him getting busted by the feds. So he gets canceled. So they're just trying. Jon Stewart and Catherine Keener are the studio execs. They're just trying to find the squeakiest clean, non-corruptible, kids person, because they just had so much bad PR. Because it wasn't just like, we find out later that it wasn't just Rainbow Randolph, like Buggy, who was played by Vincent, I'm going to butcher the last name, Chiavelli? Chiavelli, yeah, who's just really bizarre looking in general. Think about him in a kid's, show role, like it's that's nightmare fuel. But yeah, they're just, they kind of dig up Smoochy doing a
methadone clinic show.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then he's eating vegan hot dogs from a Nathan's, and pouring like
spirulina, I think he called it.
Ew, yeah, just
spirulina and nut spread or something like that.
Yeah, and even
almond butter. I think it's spirulina and almond butter.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Speaking of Sheldon's eating habits, I think another example of like how dense the writing was and how tight the script was in general is that scene where he's at the bar and he's all excited, getting borderline drunk on his orange juice with alfalfa extract squirted in. Like he starts talking to the bartender at the beginning of that scene at the end of his story. He clearly talked that bartender's ear off, and all we heard was the conclusion, and that was all we needed to hear. Bad writing would have had a way too long scene that didn't go anywhere, and it was like, why did we spend so much time on that? But it jumped right to the important part.
Yeah.
Gave us all the. It was like what George Lucas did in that first Star Wars by introducing the Kessel Run. It's like, what the fuck's the Kessel Run? I don't know what the Kessel Run is. It sounded cool.
Right.
Explaining it would not have made the movie better in any way. They should. Hopefully they'll never do that in a movie. But yeah, it was just really good writing. Really good writing.
I mean, the whole movie, I think it has like an hour 49 runtime, but it doesn't feel fat at all. It feels, everything is very fast paced. Everything is, it just feels really well edited, especially for that dense of a script with all these fantastic performances. And it's not just the Robin Williams show, which he kind of steals every scene that he's in. Everyone gets their time to shine.
But he's certainly the most comedic role in the film as well. Like Sheldon's definitely or Edward Norton's character is definitely more of a straight man to let all the funny bounce off of him.
Yeah, and I like how they match up. Danny Woodburn plays Angelo Pike, who is just he's like the number 2 in the whatever show is on. Like, he's had to deal with all these crazy assholes, so he says the Crinkle Kids are 16 feet underground or something.
Yeah. I think that's another example of, like, the writing was so good because every character was essential. They didn't waste time on unimportant characters. So Angelo ends up being the only Rhinette that we get to know, but what do we want to do? Spend time getting to know 16 different characters? He kind of, he's an analog for all of them, of course. And, like, I saw some people reviewing it talking about how, Jon Stewart was terrible in this movie, which he was, and his haircut was stupid, which it was. But that character was essential to the film, because if you take him out of it, as several people I saw suggesting, then Nora has to kind of have both of those characters in one, and she can't be that corrupt, but also that open to Sheldon's innocence. So if you tried to write, the producer of the show as one character, then you're going to run into some pretty serious problems there.
I thought he did a great job playing that kind of like underling, because the chairman was Robert Prosky, who's just fantastic, and so he has to play that. Jon Stewart had to play that dual role of pleasing the boss, but also pleasing the mob bosses too. So he had to be a bitch, right? Like, and I think he played that perfectly. His hair was awful to look at.
I don't think he did. And it's fine, because it's not the most important character in the film by any stretch of the imagination. He's at best the 4th or 5th most important character, and that might even be stretching it.
Yeah.
But I think let's talk a little bit about alternative casting. Originally, that role was supposed to be Hank Azaria. I think that would have been so much better. And I like Jon Stewart as a rule, but Hank Azaria is the next level.
Yeah.
In terms of comedic performances and acting in general.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that, and that would have been fantastic. But no one was like a deal breaker to me. It wasn't anytime anyone was on screen, because even with Jon Stewart, he was still matched up against like Robin Williams or Edward Norton or Catherine Keener. So those back and forths as a whole were still enjoyable. And Catherine Keener, man, can you believe she just turned 60 years old? Like, she was just the like almost it girl of like the late 90s and early 2000s for like this very specific amount of time.
John Malkovich.
Yeah, being John Malkovich, that's right.
But the alternate casting that I think could have potentially made this movie much less enjoyable for me, though I might have still liked it. They did originally have Jim Carrey in the Edward Norton. Jim Carrey in the Edward Norton role, and I don't think that would have worked.
No,
I like Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
I like Jim Carrey. He was doing great work at the time. That's not a comedic role, though. You really kind of need an Edward Norton type to play the straight man for Robin Williams to bounce. If Robin Williams and Jim Carrey are goofing, having a goof off,
right,
then this movie becomes way more. I don't know, way less focused.
It becomes Dumb and Dumber then. It becomes more about just them being goofy and riffing. Then I think Edward Norton was a perfect casting for it, because he kind of grounds the character and is able to take a step back when Robin Williams is going off. We get introduced to other ancillary characters like Spinner Dunn, played by Michael Rispoli from Sopranos fame. You would know him. He just plays such a fun character in this film.
Yeah, liked him quite a bit. His ability to unfocus in a scene as something is distracting him was just incredible.
Yeah.
Like finishing up a conversation with one group of people, but spotting Sheldon out of the corner of his eye and like not able to disengage right away. It was just fucking hilarious.
Whether it be malicious or not, or just constantly piling on Edward Norton's character, on Sheldon. He gets his agent because he just wants, he doesn't want to be that corporate, like, selling Smoochy shampoo and cereal. He wants more of a voice, but not for what usual people in that situation, why they want more power. He wants it to be more, he just wants more creative say over, you know, the wholesomeness of the message that is Smoochy. So he hires what he thinks, you know, he doesn't know. He gets kind of got by Burke Bennett, played by director Danny DeVito, who just is this like uber disgusting, but it's funny because even his introduction as his agent, Jon Stewart and Catherine Keener already know the song and dance, and it turns out, you know, later on that they're the ones that are kind of teaming up to get rid of Smoochy to get someone else that they can control more. It wasn't a well-timed idea for a film. I think it was actually brilliant because no one else was talking about this kind of thing.
So if we can circle back to this movie, the conversation we had earlier about this movie's reception, I think a lot of people expected this movie to have that as its theme, you know, the consumerism and how we treat children, et cetera, et cetera. And that's certainly in this film, but definitely I think the innocence and the loss of it is definitely much more of the central theme. So I think that especially some parents might have come to this movie, you know, having been sold a movie that contradicts the children's television universe with a very dark side and wanting to revel in the glee of that, and, you know, making fun of the people who make this stuff and the people who drive the consumerism, and, you know, let's laugh at the dumb products and all that. And that's what the movie they showed up for. But I think this movie also turned it back around on those same parents and said, you know, you guys are just as much the problem here. You guys drive the fervor for all this, particularly in the scene where Rainbow Randolph, Robin Williams' character, sits down to kill himself, which feels a little weird now. Covers himself in gas and is ready to light himself on fire in Times Square. And a little girl comes running up and says, "Rainbow Randolph, we still love you. What are you doing?" That kind of thing. And he has this moment where he feels at peace, and then somebody spots Sheldon. It's Rhino, and everybody goes running off to him. Definitely might have, you know, ticked off a few parents who are like, "Well, I'm not the problem. You guys are the problem."
Yeah,
you know.
Anyone that was stupid enough to be like, "Oh, this is a kids movie," like, because I know that was kind of a small complaint too, though. Like where people, you know, Robin Williams said that, yeah, this is Barney. Brian De Palma directed, you know, Barney, but. It's just I
don't feel bad for anybody who took their kid to this movie and were upset with what it was, because this was rated R.
Yeah,
like this wasn't advertised as a children's movie. It might have seemed a little fun and a little whimsical in its marketing, but it was a rated R comedy. Like, I don't know what people were expecting.
Yeah, maybe seeing, you know, Robin Williams' face tied to it, you know.
Well, he hadn't done anything this dark. He had done serious things, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's just I
don't feel bad. It's like adults who took their kids to see Deadpool in 2017 or whenever that movie came out. It's like you weren't paying attention. You didn't notice it was rated R. You're the idiot here. Stop complaining.
Right. or even Venom for that matter, which I took my son to see. I still never have really gotten why, because, you know, when it came out, I just figured that the people that I talked to, because they were, you know, my group of friends were pretty into film as well, even though we weren't like, oh, we're really into film, let's, you know, talk about film a lot, but we just had the same kind of like-minded styles that we liked. And Death to Smoochy, the moment I saw it was like in my top 10, and maybe it's fallen a little bit since, but not very far. I mean, as far as an ensemble comedy goes, you know, it's not perfect. Some of the performances are a lot.
It's pretty perfect.
Yeah, right. I know, right? I'm trying. I really am, but it's just like, you put this against, you know, something else, you know, another ensemble comedy, and there's always those few performances that stick out like a sore thumb, and none of the performances are that bad. Even, you know, Catherine Keener is perfect as far as, if you like her style of dry humor, this is perfect. You know, this is best Catherine Keener you're gonna get, and then an iconic underrated performance from Robin Williams.
I don't know. I think nobody who watched it didn't think Robin Williams had a good performance.
He was up for a Razzie for this.
That or the other reason. Yeah, the Razzies are stupid.
Yeah, right.
I would say there's two problems with this movie, and one of them isn't really a problem with the movie as much as it's a problem with marketing. The problem is that they tried to sell this niche movie to a mass audience. It was never for a mass audience. And I think my only personal problem with this movie is actually the Catherine Keener role. Not the acting she did. She did great. She was wonderful. I think that character was too much there to just serve whatever the other characters needed her to be in any particular scene.
Sure.
Like, Rainbow Randolph's character is all over the place, but that's kind of who his character is. You know, he's kind of a little insane. He's kind of a little fucked up. He's either on drugs or on withdrawal or whatever it is that's contributing to a declining mental health. So he's all over the place. Her character's all over the place too, but it really felt more like this is the character we needed her to be so that Edward Norton could go where he needed to go in this scene, or Jon Stewart could go where he needed to go in this scene, or Rainbow Randolph could go where he needed to go in this scene. And so she always seemed to be kind of, you know, what she was needed to be, not always necessarily her own character in her own right. That's why it feels a little messed up to me that they kind of make her a floozy for children's show stars. That was a twist I didn't necessarily appreciate too much.
Yeah, her arc does seem sudden, right? Just berating him to the best that Catherine Keener can.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she's just like watching him from the sidelines at one of the performances, and then you could already tell way before it's so telegraphed, like where her character is going, how they're probably going to end up together and all this. So yeah, I do see that, but I think if anyone is a POV character in this entire movie, it's probably her, right?
Yeah, I think especially at the beginning where she's skeptical, where most people probably should be, and most of the audience probably is coming at this movie skeptical of how pure Sheldon is and that sort of thing. I just think, well, certainly a lot of time passes in this movie, and that allows for a lot of growth between scenes, potentially. I still feel like that particular twist where she's slept with all of the major children's show stars, wasn't necessary to complete her arc. All it did was serve to drive a further wedge between Sheldon and Rainbow that wasn't necessary because they already had, Rainbow already had his reasons to dislike Sheldon. And like her arc was ultimately one of skepticism, somebody who's lost her innocence that she once had and lost what it was that brought her to the industry. Complete her arc of coming around and believing again, because with Sheldon's help. You didn't have to throw in the love interest at all. I mean, I guess you could. Most movies seem to need to have a love interest to sell well, and that's fine. But the fact that she had to have a love interest of every male character in the movie, it seems like, I don't know, it didn't advance her character in any meaningful way. I mean, she gets her rocks off. I don't judge her for that. It just felt like an unnecessary addition to this movie.
It felt like it could have gotten the same point across if she maybe just had a relationship prior with Rainbow Randolph, because then he would have that further revenge arc or further revenge reasoning to hate Smoochy. But I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think that's even necessary though.
Yeah. I think that one of the main reasons why this, aside from the timing, that this movie failed was, I think the large budget was the problem, because you could see the $50 million, but these type of films now are not that's like Wes Anderson money. Like Wes Anderson's making Wes Anderson films for $30 million. So people walking around in goofy kids costumes didn't really require that level. And I know it's Danny DeVito, so he already gets that level. He already has that kind of gravitas to demand that kind of a paycheck. And also,
especially when you're putting Robin Williams and Edward Norton on
exactly. Yeah, but I mean, if they would have done this movie with like a $20 million lens, maybe the people that it was supposed to be for would have showed up more, because it was just such a big production, and it was sold, like you said in the trailer, to something else. It's tragic, because yes, it is getting like a new life now in digital form and streaming services, although I had to watch this thing on Vudu. Like, I had to sign up for a Vudu account. I didn't even know that thing existed.
I've used it before, but it's garbage.
Yeah, it pretty much sucks. I had a lot
drops in ads randomly in spots that make no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
not the best. So it is kind of one of the harder to find films, but I think people are finding out about it or hearing about it or even rediscovering it now with a different kind of mindset, maybe a more pessimistic mindset nowadays, and something like this can really shine.
I really appreciate watching movies like this from this time period because they don't make movies at this level anymore.
Right.
You know, if you're going to try and make a movie dealing with these themes and these types of things, you got to make it for less than 10 million or it ain't getting made, you know.
Yeah.
Hollywood at this point is either making really low budget, you know, $5 to no more than $10 million movies, or they're making the $150 giant, you know, major IP, or your Star Warses and Treks and Marvels and DCs, and that's fine that those exist, but they're not making that middle of the road $50 million action thriller or comedy drama. Those kinds of things just aren't getting made anymore. So.
Yeah. Conversely, if it was if it was said directed by the Coen brothers, and this kind of feels almost like a Burn After Reading, where it has a monster cast, but that was a $37 million budgeted film. Made 160. I know, and that still seems high, but it made 163 million. So right off the bat, you hear Coen brothers, you already kind of know what to expect, and with a kind of a smaller budget, that's what this kind of felt like it needed, that kind of a lower budget eye. But it's just like I'm so happy, like I'm happy as a viewer for how much went into it, because it does look amazing. It does have that like old style, big Hollywood, the way it's shot, but it is just like a kind of a funny black comedy indie film.
I think the disparity between those two films is largely in that a lot of people will show up for a Coen Brothers movie because they know at least some degree what to expect in terms of quality, in terms of style. Whereas I don't think people had an idea necessarily, at least generally had an idea what Danny DeVito's style as a director was.
Right.
While he certainly had done other things, people didn't think of him as a director. And I think people didn't even necessarily realize that he had directed some of the things he had done. So I guess that just didn't have the same draw.
Now it's, 18 years later, do you still feel like it holds up as well as you did when you watched it for the first time?
I do. I still like it. I have to say, I watched the first half hour last week with my 7-year-old daughter. She did not understand it. She did not care for it.
It is a rocket ship. Yeah.
I don't know how it plays for somebody who is now the age that I was when I saw it, because I don't know. So I would have seen it in probably late 2002. I would have been 17, 18 years old. Do 17 or 18-year-olds today, have they seen Barney even? Are they too young for that at this point?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I was just a hair too old for Barney by the time that became big. But I don't know, do children's shows of this style at this level even make sense to younger folks? I have no idea.
Right. Just having a ton of young children, they're watching, the Disney channels and the Nickelodeons, but it is quite different from what we're watching. Yeah. It's almost like, we just got done today watching The Descendants 3, and they're these like young tweens are dancing like super provocative, and so it's just like, whoa, this was Rocko's Modern Life was cutting edge when I was a kid, but Jesus.
Let me tell you, we've had Descendants 3 on so much in this household. I don't even know what to tell you. And there's certainly still plenty of children's programming and stuff that's big, but nothing of this style for that age group, I don't think.
Right.
Like there's cartoons that are a pretty big deal for that age group, but nothing that has that moralistic, live-action, stuffed creature singing and dancing. So they're just watching YouTube. They're watching unboxing videos, and hopefully not this nonsense.
Horrible. Hey, this cookie looks like a rocket ship. Yeah. No, I think this film, just as a film, I think it absolutely holds up. I enjoyed it. And that's what I get kind of trepidatious about when I do this show is, I'll think of a movie that really meant something to me when I was younger, whether a child or, just in my youth in general, and I'm just like, God, I almost don't want to watch them because some of them don't hold up, and I'm like, oh God. But I mean, this absolutely, I think I love this movie at least as much. I think it's still in or around my top 10 favorite. I mean, if you are a kid of the, if you grew up in the 90s, if born in the 80s or late 70s, and you're just a fan of Robin Williams, this is a must. This is a highlight reel performance from Robin Williams, because he's just so equal parts funny and menacing and just batshit crazy. Like I said before, it harkens back to the good old, snow cap up the nose days. It's just, I mean, go back and find a 1970s stand-up tape of Robin Williams. It's the best thing ever, but he's literally like the Energizer Bunny. I think Chris Rock said when Robin Williams passed, seeing Robin Williams on stage was the first time I ever saw a human being be a real-life Bugs Bunny. It's just like he's just that level of special, and this has all of that on display. It's just perfect. And if you're an Edward Norton fan, I think also you'll enjoy this quite a bit, because this is a very different Edward Norton.
This movie has moved up the list over the years for my favorite Edward Norton movie. It's probably my favorite Edward Norton movie now, though it hasn't always been.
Oh, wow.
Certain other movies have kind of moved down the list because they haven't held up as well. I would say this is among my favorite Robin Williams movies, but not my favorite. I think I'd probably have to go Hook.
Oh, yeah.
I do love that. I do love that movie quite a bit.
Yep.
It's remarkable how well overall this movie holds up in terms of its comedy, because a lot of stuff from that time period doesn't.
Right.
Like, the only part that is difficult now is how homophobic Robin Williams' character is. I mean, you can kind of go, well, he's the villain, so it's not the end of the world. He's a bad guy. But it does rub you a little bit the wrong way, no pun intended, in 2019.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. It's funny too, because he's fucking Rainbow Randolph, right? He's covered in 8 feet of makeup, and when he's out of it, he's this sexually confused, broken man, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I don't get, it's just like, oh, you're wrong. You don't like this film. You don't think it should be in the Criterion collection. It's like, no, but it's just so good, and I just don't see why it was so shit on. But I implore the audience to please go check out Death of Smoochy if you haven't. It is like, if you're a film fan at all, it is a must. Don't let the Rotten Tomatoes score scare you.
That's one other thing we got to talk about before we wrap this thing up. I want to know if you had a chance to produce a new movie set in this universe, whether it's a sequel, a prequel, a reimagining, or what have you. What are you doing with it? Who are you casting? Who's directing?
Man.
Because I was thinking about this quite a bit today at work. I was thinking, I want this written and directed by Seth Rogen and his writing partner. I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Adam Goldberg?
Yes, that's the one. And I think I want this to be a little bit more of a Goodfellas style movie. And it's going to be starring Tom Holland as Rainbow Randolph. And it's going to be, again, like Goodfellas, more the span of Rainbow Randolph's life. He's going to be innocent when he comes into it, almost as innocent as Sheldon Mopes' character is when he comes into his movie. And like the Star Wars prequels, unfortunately, to make a comparison a lot of people aren't going to like, you're going to see him go the other way. He's not going to have somebody to take his back, and you're just going to see him do the Wolf of Wall Street thing, just doing coke, bowling with the small people from his show, hookers, and all of that. And there's going to be that voiceover like in Goodfellas, like, yeah, it was a great time. The mid '90s, it was just soaking in the pussy and doing coke and having a great time, but all good things had to come to an end, and it just gets dark. Speak to the theme of this movie, but taking it a different direction.
What would be the sequel's name?
Oh, I don't know. Fluffy Fellas. I don't know.
What are the kids' name, or what's Rainbow Randolph's?
The Crinkle Kids.
The Crinkle Kids.
The Crinkle Fellas. It's gonna have this very mobby kind of a seedy kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Him and his friends just getting rich and having a good time, and then having it all fall the fuck apart.
Absolutely. I would totally go the same route. I think I would still hire on the writer, Adam Resnick, to pen it.
Okay.
I would like to see someone like I don't know. I think like Judd Apatow is due for a comeback, or even go like Coen Brothers, just go all in and have them pen
That'd be
it.
interesting too.
Yeah, and I think that we pick up from Rainbow Randolph's funeral, because have him die in some fantastical way, or something, or not. Yeah. I think that would even be better if he just died of like choking on a cookie or something like that. But
cookie.
Yeah, but instead of a prequel, I would have it as Edward Norton ready to pass the baton on, and then him take on Tom Holland as the new character.
As his Padawan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think my evidence for Tom Holland specifically as Rainbow Randolph would be his appearance on what's called Lip Sync Battle.
Sure.
Celebrity Lip Sync Battle. But he did that, and he has a very Rainbow Randolph-esque performance. I think he did a Lady Gaga song in women's clothing.
Oh, perfect.
That I think demonstrates his ability to do the Rainbow Randolph role.
That'd be awesome. Well, that kind of wraps it up. Ian, thank you so much for joining me on talking about one of my favorite films of all time. It sounds like yours too. Thank you for coming on. Where can everyone find you, sir?
Like I said, Bad Movie Night. That's bad-movie-night.com. We've got video shows, like I said at the top of the show. John has joined us for a couple episodes of the podcast. Let's see, you were on Necronomicon, right?
That's right.
You joined us during the month of Gulai for The Incredible Melting Man.
My favorite.
And then, of course, Grandmother's House, which none of you will ever get to hear. I wouldn't normally try to plug our Patreon on somebody else's show, but Todd and Spiv are doing rap battles on the Patreon. So if you sign up for that, you can check that out now.
That is awesome.
And of course, John is going to be traveling to Pennsylvania here in a few months to join us for our Christmas special, where we're gonna play a little Die Hard board game. So make sure you follow the channel so you're ready to go for that when that happens.
Right. Yeah, if you want to go to my Patreon and donate so I can do something like that, that would be great. Yeah, that probably has the same amount of chance of me actually watching Die Hard. Although never say never, because I just watched my first James Bond films, and I'm good. I watched 2. Don't need to proceed. But yeah, you could find, if you want to listen to this in podcast form only, you could do so on all the Spotify's, iTunes. Go over there, leave us apples or oranges or however the fuck you rate podcast formats. If you like this video, share it around, tell everyone that we exist, hit the thumbs up, all that good stuff. How do you like that?
Because friends come in all sizes, take it from me. Golly gee, size never matters when you want some friendly patter from a pal who is true and can lift you up when you're blue. You can count